Hello and welcome to another podcast edition of Taiwan Talk. I'm Keith Manconi. Newspapers are, of course, for telling us about what's new, what's happening in the here and the now. But everything has a history to it, and a new Taipei Times column is taken on the task of helping us better understand Taiwan by helping us get to know its history. Taiwan in Time is that column, and it's released every Sunday, bringing to light important historical events that took place the following week. The author is Taipei Times feature writer Cheung, and I spoke with him recently about where the idea for this column came from. Cheung, thanks so much for joining us today.
No problem.
So let's just start. There's a bit of a story even about, there's some history to your history column, even, we could say. So tell us about how this all got started. You were working at a paper in Wyoming, which is kind of the seat of this whole thing?
Yeah. So I was in this tiny Wyoming town called Rawlins, 9,000 people, and I was working for the newspaper there. And so they decided to start a new column, and they wanted to do a historical column. And I was a new guy there, so they asked me to do it. And I'd always been interested in history, but I've never really written about it, so I didn't know what to do. So I just went to our county museum, and yeah, everyone was like really nice there, and they helped me research and come up with topics, and then just kind of got into the groove of it. And it was supposed to be a 1-year column, and I was there for 3 years and was still running when I left, and I hope it's still running now. But
small town, somebody takes a notice of their history. I'm sure they appreciated that.
Yeah, because there's no there hasn't really been a history book on Rawlins this. There's more just like notes. Like this guy wrote these like a history book of people who lived here from like 1865 to 19 something, but it was all kind of just lists of people. It wasn't like really like a narrative where I tried to make it like interesting with photos. And yeah, this town was really interesting because it was right in the Wild West. Like a lot of like outlaws, like Butch Cassidy, like hung out in the area, and like there were lynchings, and there was this guy whose skin was made into shoes, and there was a lot of weird stuff. I was like, this.
Using the term interesting rather broadly.
Yeah. So like there needs to be something on this town. So that turned into a book,
and so you took that mentality of there needs to be more written about this town, and you carried it over to Taiwan, and now you're applying it to Taiwanese history at the Taipei Times.
Yeah. That's pretty much what I'm doing, because when I came back, I found that even though Taiwan's not like an isolated place like Rawlins, there's still I think it was more my knowledge, like having kind of grown up here and realizing that me and a lot of people I talked to like knew nothing about Taiwanese history. Right,
you grew up kind of half in Taiwan and half in the U.S.
Yeah.
And so this is an English language column. So is that kind of the market that you're trying to fill? Or it sounds like you're almost saying that that's a scarcity for everybody, regardless of language.
Yeah, it kind of is. Like there's been more Chinese sources, but it's still, I think it's still like a general awareness kind of thing, because most people didn't learn it in school, so you wouldn't really take an interest in it unless you were really like passionate about history or politics. Like it gets politicized a lot too. And but yeah, but our paper, I think it's more for the English, because there's so few English sources. Like Taiwan, if you really wanted to learn about Taiwanese history, there's plenty of Chinese books that you could go pick up. But I felt like, for the English ones, there weren't, and not in a way where it's kind of just like a 700-word article, easy to read,
right.
Narrative style, like using primary sources, that kind of stuff with photos. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right, and definitely, and, for those of us in Taiwan that maybe weren't born here and are trying to understand this place as well as we can, it is a very helpful resource to have that come out every Sunday. So maybe this could be the part where you help us all out a little bit and you reveal your secrets. Tell us a little bit about how this thing gets made. I mean, are you relying a lot on Chinese sources?
Yeah, actually, almost all Chinese sources. Yeah, I like to use primary sources, so I'm actually quoting from like the direct materials. I do a lot of like oral history or like old newspapers or old magazines, articles, like direct sources.
So you're in the library looking at microfilm, or
they have it digitized.
Oh, it's
like,
digitized
at the
now. Okay.
National Central Library. So yeah, you could just go on there, sign up on a machine, and search. It pretty much has like every newspaper that's being published in Taiwan.
Right, and so every week, the whole point is you're this is published on Sunday, and then you're looking at the time period of the week after that Sunday. So from that upcoming Monday to the next Sunday,
Yeah.
and you're looking at some period in time that corresponds to that week. And so how do you find any given topic for that week?
There's a couple sources. There's this website that it's a Chinese Cultural University site, and it just has like today in history that you can just type in the date and search, and it has international like domestic news. So that's a big source. So I just look on that, and then I just go on Wikipedia, and I can search the date, and they have an entry on the date and all the people born that day, and I just do a search for Taiwan, and it turns out it has like important events and who's born and who died, and then I just kind of pick something that's like that would make a good narrative. Yeah.
So narrative is the key here, it sounds like. Let's just run through a couple of the topics that caught my eye. I mean, you write a lot about protests during the Cold War period, during the martial law period. You wrote a little bit about the clashes between Taiwan and China on some of the outlying islands. You even wrote about Taiwan's first department store. So you're kind of all over the place. What is it that catches your eye as, this is something that I should bring to my readers? This is something that they should know about.
Let's see. I just kind of look at a lot of it. What makes a good narrative? So because it's still like a column, we want to make it fun. We want to make it interesting to read. We just don't want to make it just like a textbook, history textbook kind of thing. So, I first look and see if it lends to a good story. So the department store, like first I was like, what am I going to write about a department store? Like, and then I kind of looked into it and I was like, oh, there's an elevator.
Yeah, but this is Taiwan's first department store.
Yeah, Taiwan's first department store.
In the 1930s during the Japanese colonial period.
Yeah, so I found that, there's an elevator, and then I found that actually gave rise to like a saying that was like wearing a farmer's hat, riding an elevator, which was...
That's where that comes from. You're kidding me.
Yeah.
All right.
So that was so I was like, okay, like that's a good story. So then I just went with it. So I don't really look at the topic. I kind of just look at what comes up and what makes a good story. What catches people's attention.
But I mean, it seems like you're kind of doing this for a purpose to some extent. I mean, back in Wyoming, I'm sure some of the purpose was just to bring to light stories that a lot of the people in the community didn't know, or perhaps even give them a sense of town pride. Like, we have so much going on here. Is there something similar going on here in Taiwan, or is it different in this case?
Here, I don't know. Part of it is personal because, like, me, like, I don't know anything about this, and I lived here for 8 or 9 years growing up. So then I kind of thought, if I don't know about any of this, then, there's a lot more that should be known. And there's a lot of, like, Taiwanese history and how it is today is kind of a result of all of those things that happened. And people just aren't aware of it. Partly because of the way education was when I was growing up. Like, we didn't really learn that much Taiwanese history. I mean, the kids now do, but they didn't used to before. So it was kind of like uncovering hidden, like a hidden past, or It was almost like that because I was just surprised about how much people didn't know, like through people talking to people.
Mm. Has your perspective on Taiwan changed at all as you get more in touch with these cultural roots? I mean, do you still feel like there's some relevance there for you?
Yeah, yeah. I just feel like I understand it a lot more, and like everywhere I go, you can see like bits of history. There's still a lot of history in Taiwan, and it just helps me connect to it more. Like I could look at this, and I was like, "Hey, I know where that's from, or why that's here," or and there's so much that's tied to this history, like the way society is, or the way politics are run, or the way culture, or the way people do things. It's it just gives me a deeper understanding of where everything's coming from.
What would you point to as a bit of history that surprised you the most? I mean, is there anything that you really didn't expect to turn up?
I think a lot of it was the protests and the anti-authoritarian stuff going on during the martial law period. Like I didn't know that people were doing so much to fight for their freedom or what they thought was the right thing to do, or like their rights, or yeah, I kind of just thought everything was kind of suppressed, and and then they lifted martial law, and then people started to be able to come out and talk about these things. But actually, it's been going on even in the 50s and 60s. There were people who were fighting to change things, or just for more political freedom, or freedom of speech, or human rights, like at great cost. Like right now you go protest and nothing's really going to happen to you. You might get taken away by the police, but then like you're risking your whole life and your family and your business reputation, like everything. So yeah, so that kind of was impressive to me.
Right, gives a sense of some of the depth there for sure. Do you think that there's any way in which getting more in touch with this history would help people today in terms of understanding the current political climate, or understanding what's going on in society? I mean, is this a source of wisdom, do you think?
Yeah, I think it is, because so much in Taiwan is politicized, I feel like. It's way more than in the States. I feel like there's like politics just manages to like kind of make its way into everything, like even like pop culture and like stuff like that. And so I think it's why everything is the way it is now. Like that has a lot to do with, and it's really complicated. It's like this whole thing where you kind of, and there's no way not to mention it if you're writing about Taiwan, if you're reading about Taiwan, and you kind of, like every guidebook tries to explain that like really complicated political history. So
right.
I think you really need to know that to kind of understand Taiwan.
So here's a question that I kind of ask any interviewee that's dealing with historical issues in Taiwan. I mean, it's so easy for even the most best intentioned historical inquiry to be kind of co-opted by the politics of today, because those politics are so strong, and they really color our perspective on history. Whether we're serving the narrative of this party or that party, or with whatever they might want us to believe. I mean, how do you get past that? How do you get a cleaner sense of history, directly to the sources?
I don't know if that's possible, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because everything's written by someone who has an agenda. So, I mean, you can by going to like the primary sources.
The original documents.
Yeah, the original documents. So I like the oral history kind of stuff, or letters written by that person, or like for one of the Wushe incident, I went into, because there's just a lot of different accounts of the story. Like there's that someone said there was poison gas, someone said there was chemical warfare. So I actually found the military documents that the Japanese kept during their suppression of that incident, and it actually had So I actually looked through that whole thing, and I found there was one item where it was like, oh, they ordered some mustard gas from Japan. So I'm like, okay, so there's evidence that did happen. So then the whole column turned into kind of looking into whether they actually use biological warfare or not. So it kind of changes the direction of it too.
It's really a factual inquiry more than anything else.
Yeah, it is. Like a lot of it is kind of like I try to dig into, like even when I see, oh, this historian said that, like I would try to find the primary source of where he or she got that information from. So I'm just not looking at someone talking, because everybody has their like agenda no matter what, and especially when you look at books published under martial law, like it's going to have that slant.
Right. Absolutely.
The way to get out, like you start from these sources and then you try to find where they got their sources from, and the library is a great place for that. So I always try to look that up to make sure. So if it's like, in fact, then that gets past like all the political ideology and whatever, like slant that people try to
put on top of it. Yeah. Would you say that at this point, I mean, after learning as much as you have about Taiwan's history, would you say that you still have any like underlying questions about Taiwan's history that you yourself are still trying to figure out?
Yeah, like I feel like I have a pretty good idea of the recent history of with all the things I've written, and like the Japanese era, kind of like we kind of know what's going on there. But I think like how life was here when it was like nominally part of the Qing dynasty, where because I was at the Palace Museum, the South one, and they were talking about this large-scale rebellion that happened like in the South. Was in I think that was in the 1700s or 1800s. So I thought that would, like, I kind of want to move into that section of history and find how life was in Taiwan there before, because the Qing dynasty, it ruled, like Taiwan was part of its territory, but it didn't really send anybody to actually administer it until after the Sino-French War. So so I'm really interested in how life was before that, and how these people were just kind of coming over from the mainland and like interacting with like Aboriginals and that kind of stuff. And then it must be a
very interesting time in Taiwan history. I mean, I think it was known as one of the wildest parts of Asia, right? So I really like to look more into like that. All right, so a lot to look forward to there. We have been speaking today to Han Cheung. He is a features reporter for the Taipei Times, and his column is Taiwan in Time, out every Sunday morning. Han, thanks so much for speaking with me today.
No problem. Thanks for having me here.
This has been another podcast edition of Taiwan Talk. Taiwan Talk is, of course, ICRT's weekly interview segment, bringing you conversations from and about Taiwan. Broadcasts every Monday at 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. at the top of the hour newscasts. You can also find extended versions of those broadcast interviews, such as the one you just heard, online at the ICRT website, on iTunes, and also the ICRT blog. I also want to remind our listeners about the other show that I produce, Taiwan This Week. Taiwan This Week is ICRT's weekly news roundup, bringing you the top news stories from Taiwan each and every Friday. That broadcasts Friday evenings at 8:30 p.m. Once again, there is an extended online version that you can find in all the same places as Taiwan Talk, the ICRT website, iTunes, and also the ICRT blog. So if you want to get up to speed on Taiwan news, but it's hard to kind of work up that daily newspaper habit, or if you just want the expert insights from some of our commentators, we do get some of the best in the business in terms of covering Taiwan, then I'd certainly want to check out that show. All right, that's enough advertisement for me. Thanks once again to Han Cheung of the Taipei Times. You can find his column one last time, Taiwan in Time, every Sunday morning, either in news racks or at the Taipei Times website. That's it for the show. Thanks for listening. For Taiwan This Week, I'm Keith Manconi. See you next time.